Hey everybody, it's Missy.
It's April.
And this is SheelaNaGig. Hey everybody, welcome. What's going on, April?
What's going on? I am having my daughter, my 21-year-old daughter, actually asked me out to lunch.
Damn, girl.
I know. I'm pretty excited.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
That's super exciting.
Considering when she was 16, she didn't want me to, make her a tuna sandwich.
That's kind of where my 12-year-old's going right now.
Yeah.
It's how it goes. It's how it goes. But I should just say, before I forget, I just want to say what we do on the show.
Oh, yes.
Each week we explore our own SheelaNaGig. A woman's strength, perseverance has led her to greatness, who empowers us and inspires us. Maybe it's somebody you've heard of, maybe it's somebody you haven't heard of, but we want to, share more, give these ladies some light.
Absolutely.
So thanks for listening. And back to your daughter Sarah. It's lovely that you guys are having lunch.
I'm excited. I'm mostly excited that she invited me. I feel like I'm always doing the asking.
Yeah.
But I realized, because she went from hating me and not wanting to be around me to accepting my offers most of the time when she could. And now she invited me. So
that's so nice.
So the hope is, as your daughter goes through those wonderful adolescent years, and they turn into somebody you don't quite recognize, they come out the other end.
You keep telling me that. They come back. I mean, she's still my little girl. She's 12, looks like she's 16, acts like she's 16.
No, acts like she's 20. But
You're right. But, I know it's always comforting because, she'll be really crabby toward me and not want to listen to me and not be very respectful. And then when when she goes to bed, I always say, I love you. She always says, love you too.
Aww.
And I hope she keeps saying that.
Oh, she might.
I remember when I stopped saying I love you to my mom. I remember it would actually get stuck
in your throat. Well, at least we know it is a condition called young adulthood.
Yeah. Our moms were both a little rough too.
They were.
My mom, suffered some mental issues and
I would say my mom had a rather progressed personality disorder.
Yeah, we both have talked about our moms, so I don't think we had necessarily a normal relationship with our mothers, but I know we both loved our mothers.
Yes.
And I feel like despite my mother's mental illness, I felt very loved by her. I know she loved me. So,
right.
She loved me as best she could under the circumstances.
Exactly.
But it was still trying.
Yes, very much.
And maybe more so than, having a mom who's healthy. I think I'm healthy. I think I'm pretty healthy, and I know you're healthy, so.
I don't know that I'm healthy, but if you say so, I'm going to take your word for it. Okay.
Take it where you can get it,
I'm so
April.
healthy.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so healthy.
That's
good, yeah.
So what are we going to talk about today? It's your turn for a Sheela.
I just see if there's anything else I need to talk about with you before I venture into my Sheela.
You know me, I'm always like, so who's the Sheela?
I know, she's very impatient.
She's
she's
I'm
on
patient
it.
by
she's
nature.
On it.
I grew up in New York City. You don't wait for grass to grow under your feet. It doesn't grow in cement.
No.
So you better start moving.
Yep.
All right.
I get that.
But Missy's from the Midwest, where grass really does grow. So Missy, let us know when you're ready.
Okay. I'm just thinking for a moment just to make sure. We have some really exciting things coming up. I just want to mention that real quick. We have an interview coming up with a female magician.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Well, she's more than a magician. Just to add a little intrigue to this, she's pretty badass.
She's a lot of things, actually.
Yeah.
And we're super excited to interview her. That's all I'm going to say. We don't give away too much, but she's coming over in March, and we're going to do an interview with her, and we're going to also talk about a Sheela magician in history together, which is going to be really fun. We are also going to be talking to, I believe, the director, the writer, and the actress from a one-woman show here in LA called The Feast.
Yes, coming right up.
Super excited about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of excitement.
There's a lot happening in SheelaNaGig.
Yeah, you need to tune in. So keep tuning in and send us your Sheilas. Who do you want to hear about, or who do you know that we don't know about that we should know about?
Right.
Eventually hoping to do some live stuff too. You could send us a letter if you want. Go to our website. Check it out. Send us a letter. Send us an email, and tell us, what Sheilas you have in mind. And it could be somebody in your family. It could be somebody who's kind of unknown who's got this amazing story that you want to share. So just keep it in mind. Okay, so I'm going to move into my Sheela, or Sheilas, I should say, for today.
Okay. All right.
It's quite a tale. There are a few trigger warnings in this.
Okay.
Which I'll try to be kind of specific. I will just say in general, there is some murder involved in this.
Well, considering how much you love crime podcasts, that's not that surprising.
I know.
All right. Well, I'm looking.
Now the question is, justified murder. You be the judge of that.
So we always have notes. But when I tell you that Missy has a book, you may want to go make a cup of coffee.
You might, yeah. I'm gonna try to,
So get started.
I usually get off book quite a bit too. So right. Just kind of going through. Okay, so we're going back to World War II era.
Okay.
And I'm going to talk a little bit here about the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands that really spurred the rise of many resistance groups. But there are very few stories, I think, as remarkable as those of Truus Oversteegen and her sister, Freddie Oversteegen.
I know this story. I have to say,
you?
Oh yeah, I've looked at them many times. I thought about, doing it.
Yeah.
But I just didn't I was getting up the stomach for it. So
it's true. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one, but it's also an inspiring one.
It's really inspiring, important. I did have some nightmares last night about it, actually. But again, sometimes those most important stories can be the hardest to tell. And,
yes.
And this is a really hard one. And of course, I don't want to leave out also Hannie Schaft, who is also part of their group. Mm-hmm. So these women displayed extraordinary courage. Bravery, resilience, engaging in direct action against the Nazis.
Right.
And their stories are not only a testament to that bravery, but also an inspiration for future generations. And, it exemplifies a story of youth acting with tremendous courage against the greatest evil of the modern world.
Well said.
Yeah. So Truus Oversteegen was born on August 29th, 1923, and her sister Freddie was born 2 years later on September 6th, 1925. They were both born in Schoten, Netherlands, a village in the province of North Holland that is now part of the Dutch city of Haarlem. The two girls lived on a barge with their mother, Trenja, and their father, Jacob.
They lived on a barge?
They lived on a barge.
How kind of cool is that?
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Living on a barge.
I'd like to live on a barge,
maybe.
Me too.
Me too. So both parents were socially aware communists with a fierce intolerance for injustice. And they instilled their children with these values. And their mother used to encourage them to make dolls for children during the Spanish War, children who were suffering. So she would make dolls with the children that they would send. And then beginning in the early 1930s, she volunteered with International Red Aid, which is basically a social services group, which is kind of a communist Red Cross for political prisoners around the world.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Mom was pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah. The mom in her own right was quite the Sheela, for sure. Their parents, Trenja and Jacob, also harbored people fleeing from Lithuania on the barge. Mm-hmm. And they were, of course, at this time, fleeing from political instability, growing anti-Semitism. And they would hide these people in the hold of their ship, which is pretty amazing, so that they would be hidden and protected. Mm-hmm. And so, again, from a very young age, this was just kind of part of, these two sisters. They're growing up. They were taught the importance of fighting injustice, and were taught, again, those communist values. But for Jacob and Trenja Oversteegen, each day brought the struggle for providing for these two children. Mm-hmm. So apparently Jacob didn't seem to really be able to hold down a steady job, and Trenja really felt a need constantly to take up the slack, so she was constantly hustling and working different jobs, and felt, she was always kind of stretching their limited resources as far as she could. So in 1933, she decided the couple should break up. Freddie described it as, that her mother one day was just really fed up and just said, I think it's time for you to leave. The father apparently never made any money. He didn't pay for anything on the barge. But she said it wasn't an ugly divorce or anything. She actually had this memory of her father singing a French farewell song from the bow of the ship when they left.
That's interesting.
I know.
So long. Farewell.
Right, exactly. And sadly, they didn't really see him too much after that. He was kind of out of the picture after that. That was kind of her last memory. And in this new reality, money, of course, though, was tighter than ever. And, her mom is now a single mom. And she, again, was working hard, determined to give her children a decent upbringing. And so at this point, the mother and the daughters moved into a flat. And all they could really afford was straw mattresses. So they were sleeping on these straw mattresses. And at that point, they also became members of the Dutch Youth Federation, another communist group. And as Truus had said, the older sister, at one point, she said, we didn't have much, but my mother always figured out something. And I played the zither and ukulele. Freddie played guitar. And our mother played the mandolin. We were always singing, playing music. And in due course, their mother eventually remarried, and the family welcomed a baby boy, their half-brother, Robbie.
Aww.
So it sounds like things did get a little bit better. Although it's really interesting because I couldn't find any information really on who she married, or very little information about Brother Robbie as well.
Yeah, that's always hard when you just sort of get this vague idea about
Right.
other relatives.
Well, I like to get on those tributaries.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to say, okay, well, what happened to this person? Or who is this person? Or and sometimes you just can't do it.
No can do.
So not a lot of information there.
Yeah.
Like most sisters, Truus and Freddie, they didn't always get along, of course. They were 2 years apart, which is pretty close in age. And they had pretty different personalities. Truus was the older of the two. She was much more assertive. She was kind of dictatorial. And
big sister complex.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she felt very entitled to boss little Freddie around. But Freddie, on the other hand, of course, was the little sister. She was eager to display her independence. And she was considered very pretty. She had really soft curls in her hair, a dimpled chin. She always had a beautiful smile. And she was considered kind of mischievous. And a lot of people described her as fetching. I love that. That's such a good word, isn't it?
You're
fetching.
So fetching.
I want to bring that word back
lovely.
into my vocabulary. Or,
Fetching.
I don't know if it was ever in my vocabulary. I want to bring that word into my vocabulary. Fetching. She was said to move with the lightness of a dancer and flitted around Harlem like a little sprite on her bicycle.
Oh,
I love that.
lovely.
So Truus is more of a tomboy than her younger sister, particularly when she put her hair up. She liked to wear her hair up under her bike cap. And her mannerisms were always considered a little less feminine. She would sit with her knees apart. She would take more space on the couch, while Freddie was always kind of delicate and her legs were carefully crossed and unobtrusive. That wasn't really the case for Truus. She wasn't afraid to kind of spread out.
Yeah.
And the truth was that, of course, Freddie could be that annoying little sister. She was always a little bit of a tag-along, but she was more than willing to let Truus take the lead on most everything. And Truus could be a little bit of a bully, too, with that kind of arrogance of a big sister.
Right.
But, Freddie really admired her and looked up to her. So they worked pretty well together despite that. And for a brief period, it seemed like, again, their lives had kind of improved. Their mom had met somebody. They, I believe he was bringing in some income. Things were starting to take a turn and look a little bit better for the family. And that's about the time that Hitler came into power, unfortunately. So during this time, the Oversteegen family, even though they had very little, they continued to shelter Jewish refugees, dissidents, and gay people as they fled Germany and other neighboring countries. And Truus and Freddie began to bunk together to make room. So, again, they didn't have anything. They didn't have much, but they
did what they could.
They did what they could to help others, which I think is really admirable.
Yeah.
And through their mother's example, of course, they learned that if you have to help somebody like refugees, you have to make sacrifices for yourself. and also to believe that one's principles should be supported by one's actions. And this is the words they lived by throughout their lives. So in May of 1940, this is when the Nazis invaded the Netherlands, and they began an occupation that would last until the end of the war. And after the Nazis advanced into the Netherlands, both sisters witnessed the horrors of Hitlerism firsthand. Freddie is quoted as saying, "I remember how people were taken from their homes," she recalled in an interview with Nora Spander of Vice in 2016. "The Germans were banging on the doors with the butts of their rifles. They made so much noise, you'd hear it in the entire neighborhood, and they would always yell. It was very frightening." Can you imagine?
No, I can't. I know. No matter how much we hear about this history, it is hard to imagine.
It is. So the Germans were also masters of propaganda, as we know, and manipulation, and they wasted no time in taking control of the Dutch media. They took over the newspapers, the radio stations, all those newsreels that would play before movies. And suddenly every single story that was out there, every single broadcast image, it was meticulously produced to promote the Nazi agenda.
Wow.
And it was bearing the truth under huge piles of lies. And not everybody saw through those lies, unfortunately.
Wow.
Sounds a little bit like today.
Yeah.
So publishers and journalists had to follow these new rules or they could get arrested. People were very intimidated. They could be thrown in jail or
Absolutely.
much worse, as we know.
Yes.
Yeah. So this oppressive environment created this really pressing need for alternative sources of information and voices of dissent. And it really fostered the rise of these underground publications, which not only offered a lifeline of authentic information, but it also played a very crucial role in uplifting the spirits of those who were opposing the new regime.
Right.
They didn't feel alone because a lot of them were hiding. But through these publications, they were able to connect and feel supported and know they weren't alone. So the resistance work began when Truus was 15 and Freddie was 13. And this is when they began to help their mother distribute anti-Nazi leaflets. And they started helping her steal identity papers to help Jewish people escape from Germany. And they felt really proud to be part of this kind of sneaky, super important, network of couriers that helped spread the resistance's message. And Freddie later recalled in interviews that we would also post warnings across German posters in the street calling men to work in Germany. And then we'd hurry off on our bikes. So they felt free to paste right over German announcements that were posted throughout the city.
That was pretty gutsy.
They were super freaking gutsy girls, let me tell you. And they were young. They were so young at this. They were 15 and 13 at this time.
It's hard to imagine as a mother wanting or allowing your daughters to do that, take such chances. Oh my gosh.
She allowed them to do much worse, as you will see.
Actually, yeah.
You said you know about this a little bit. But yeah. But she was very committed. She was very committed to the cause.
They were all committed, yeah.
Yeah. Even at the cost of,
their own safety and their own, potentially their own lives.
Yeah, and their children's lives, I guess. It's very admirable and scary, and I can't imagine being that mother. Yeah. So they continued to, one of them would guard, watch for people coming. The other one would paste over the poster, and then they would jump on their bikes and off they would go. So they would also get onto buses, and they would take their anti-Nazi leaflets and they would kind of secretly stuff them into the bags of strangers riding around them. So the stranger might not even know, where this information came from. They were very covert. And these weren't just subversive acts. These were so dangerous that we just talked about. If they were caught by the Nazis, they could have been killed. They could have been killed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The fact, though, that they were young girls and that Freddie apparently looked even younger. She would wear these braids. Yeah. And she looked even younger than 13. That meant that they were less suspicious. And they used this to their advantage. In the Netherlands, the resistant network was divided into several groups. There were several. I'm just going to tell you about a few of them, but they each had their own specialty. There was one called the LO, And they were really good at helping people go into hiding. They were kind of, conquer and divide. So they had these different divisions. And then they had the OD version that was focused on gathering intelligence and staying in touch with the Dutch government that was in exile. And then finally, whenever something needed to be blown up or someone had to be killed, the RVV, which was also called the Council of Resistance, would be on it. So these collective efforts of these groups were vital in resisting the German occupation in the Netherlands and supporting those that were affected by it. So Truus and Freddie soon caught the attention of Haarlem Council of Resistance's leader, Frans van der Weel, who visited the Oversteegen family and asked if the girls would join the resistance. He showed up at the door one day, and at this point Freddie was just 14, however she looked much younger, and Truus was 16. And with permission from their mother, the sisters joined the resistance at this time.
Oh my gosh. As a parent, this is so hard.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, but their mother gave them the simple advice of always stay human, which is hard to do
in that era, especially. Yeah.
And I don't think she honestly ever knew the extent. I don't know. I get the sense that she knew, but maybe she didn't quite know as much as, because really at that time when women joined the resistance, they were not assassins. They were doing other things.
Yeah.
They were more in charge of, hiding people and maybe stealing documentation, and they weren't blowing up bridges and killing SS soldiers.
Right.
Or maybe she just put on those blinders knowing that something needed to get done.
Maybe she was really proud of them and did know, or
hard to say, and not a lot of information about where she was kind of at with it. The day that Mr. van der Weel came to the door, it was Trinja who heard his knock, and she opened the door. She knew who he was, and she knew who he was through her party connections, of course. She immediately let him in. He said he would like to talk to her daughters. And so Truus and Freddie were kind of peeking through the sliding glass door to the entryway, and they were whispering and kind of elbowing each other. They didn't quite know who he was. And they tried to, be calm, cool, and collected when their mother opened the doors and introduced him to the daughters. And Frans was quite formal. He took off his hat, and he, first shook Truus's hand and then Freddie's. He introduced himself, and then he proceeded to sit in the lumpiest chair in the living room. So just trying to show that he was, not above them.
Right, yeah.
And she and Freddie were really surprised when their mother excused herself and left the girls alone with their guest. Now that's a little telling right there.
Yeah, that is.
I don't think she necessarily wanted to know, but she knew that
she might not, or she was
brave.
Signaling to her daughters that this was about them and their decision, and just sort of really letting them know there. And
I can't imagine giving them that kind of autonomy at that age and that climate, but again, no judgment.
Well, also they're living under a different era. So
I can't even imagine.
We're not faced with the kinds of questions and reality that these people are living under.
Exactly. It's there's just no judgment, obviously. So their mother's reasons kind of became apparent when Frans introduced the purpose of his visit, and he explained that he was putting together a new resistance group in Haarlem, and that he had heard from members of the party that Truus and Freddie were intrepid activists. And he saw that they were very eager and brave, and he suggested that what he had in mind was a little bit more subversive, a lot more violent, and a lot more dangerous probably than anything they had done before. But of course no one would suspect such young, beautiful girls to be capable of such deadly skills. So again, the Dutch resistance, of course, was believed to be a man's effort in a man's war. If women were involved, they were, again, doing things like handing out pamphlets, anti-German pamphlets. So this was a very unusual proposal. And in the Soviet Union, women and girls had been fighting the Germans since the invasion began. And the war typically had always kind of underestimated women.
Mm-hmm. We talked about the night witches.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We did talk about the night witches, a perfect example. The last thing people expected still, though, was these young women to be fighters.
Sure.
Like the night witches.
Like the night witches, yeah.
Again, this would make Truus and Freddie especially valuable to the Dutch cause. Mm-hmm. And Frans explained that Truus and Freddie might be called upon to blow up bridges, to blow up trains, and they would have to learn to use pistols, grenades, and how to detonate bombs. So Frans then turned to them and said, "Do you think you could shoot someone?"
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine? So Freddie just kind of, she's the younger one, she just kind of blurted out, "Well, I've never done that before." But Truus seemed to genuinely consider the question. There was a long pause, apparently, as if she had been mulling that possibility over for a long time.
Yeah.
And then she said to Frans, "Yes, a real fascist, a swine who takes people from their homes to have them executed, I could do that."
Wow.
But she hesitated over other possibilities because she was worried that not all German soldiers, of course, were Nazis. Mm-hmm. But Frans then assured them that in his resistance group, they would make certain that any executions would be Gestapo or blatant traitors, and there would be no mistakes. So that was encouraging. Mm-hmm. He told them that the first rule of the group would be that they could not breathe a word about what they were doing to anyone, and that included their mother.
Ah.
So again, we don't really know how much she knew.
Right.
We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Truus and Freddie walked into the door where he whispered that he'd need an answer within 2 days. Hmm. And then he said, "By the way, once you're in the group, there's no turning back."
Oh, wow.
That's
it's a little ominous.
That's very ominous. Yeah. So
there's no turning back.
Can you imagine?
No.
How did your meeting go with Frans, girls?
It's fine.
It's great, Mom. It was great. We got to think about a little something, but But Frans was really impatient. He was ready to go. So he decided he needed to put them through a test. So the very next day, he shows up at the door, dressed up like a Gestapo officer, waving a fake gun, demanding to know where a specific Jewish person was hiding. And despite how unexpected and basically horrifying the situation must have been, they must have been scared to death, Truus and Freddie refused to betray this man.
Oh, wow.
And they literally started kicking and hitting him.
Oh, my goodness.
Can you imagine?
No.
Because that in itself, doing something like that, if he was really a Gestapo...
Yeah, they would have killed...
He would have killed them on the spot.
Absolutely, yep.
But they were so brave,
yeah,
they were just willing to say, fuck it, and start hitting him and kicking him and saying, "No way, we're not telling you where this person is."
That's amazing.
So he knew right there in that moment...
They were the real deal.
That they had what it took.
Yeah.
So then Frans dropped the act, and he revealed that the encounter was just a test to see if they had what it took to join the resistance.
And clearly they did.
And Truus and Freddie also realized at this point. It was very reaffirming for them.
They must have been very telling, yeah.
It was very reaffirming for them. Like, we can handle the heat. What it really proved kind of is that we're willing to take our lives.
Yeah, we're willing to lay our lives on the line.
Right. To fight for others.
Yeah.
So that was very telling for them as well. So they said, "Sure, we'll do it." They took Frans up on his offer, and they officially became part of the Council of Resistance.
Wow.
Freddie later is quoted as saying, "I thought we would be starting kind of a secret army." So that was kind of cool, And Frans had said that he would give us military training and that he would definitely teach us a thing or two. So someone taught us to shoot, and we learned to march in the woods. And there were about 7 of us, and we were the only girls.
Wow.
So she thought that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, their young age, innocent appearance, and the fact that they were girls proved exceptionally advantageous, and they could move through those streets without drawing the same level of attention and suspicions that would have happened, of course, if they were adult men.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even teenage boys. Yeah,
right.
They're just more suspicious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're girls. They're young, pretty girls is what they are.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Truus is supposedly very pretty too, even though she was more of a tomboy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it allowed them to, carry messages and transport weapons, gather intelligence with this very low risk of ever being caught. And of course, here's these young soldiers.
Yep.
And really, they're amidst the horrors of war, but they do not lose their interest in girls. In fact, it's kind of that being far from home, and you're in a dangerous situation. It probably somewhat heightened their desire for some connection, for that normalcy found in female companionship. So the girls took complete advantage of this. So their first mission was arson.
Okay.
So they went and flirted with a couple of the SS guards and kind of distracted them from their duties. And in the interim, the resistance got in there and burnt down 2 of those Nazi-occupied warehouses. And after the success of that, the girls were told that they were going to go down to a potato shed, and that's where they were taught to shoot. And from then on, they were considered trained assassins.
That was it, huh?
Yeah, that was it.
Wow.
I like how they took them to a potato shed.
Yeah.
What is a potato shed?
I don't know.
I don't know either. But I guess they had a lot of potatoes to shoot.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good target, right?
Yeah. Potatoes are. They're good. It's a good target, yeah. So Freddie and Truus were trained in the tactics of armed resistance, and of course they learned how to shoot, but they also along the line learned how to blow up bridges, and again how to sabotage those railroad lines, and they literally took up arms against their Nazi occupiers just the same as men in the resistance. But again, those girls had these assets that their male counterparts didn't have. So Freddie was the very first one, the younger one, to shoot a Nazi traitor.
Wow.
Freddie loved to ride her bike, as we heard earlier. She was quite small. She would, wear her hair in those braids and ride her bike around. It made her look very young and disarming. And it enabled her to get away with a lot. So her first method of attack was a drive-by. Truus cycled the bike while Freddie sat on the back.
Looking very young and
looking
cute.
Young and cute.
Innocent.
And then she would shoot people.
Wow.
They never walked, because they could get away quickly, too, on the bike.
Yeah.
And they always made sure that kind of the coast was clear. And it just worked really well, they said.
All right. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Using their innocence, using their looks, their age.
Their youthfulness, yeah.
Their sex.
Yeah.
So to pull this off, they would often put on some bright red lipstick, and they'd put on like a drunken act, like a tipsy act.
Oh.
And then they would, maybe go into like a bar or talk to a soldier on the street, and they would transform themselves into what they would call muffin girls.
What's a muffin girl?
A muffin girl. A muffin girl is a derogatory term for Dutch women who were overly friendly with the German occupiers.
Ah. It's interesting because I have a little, I know a bit about this story, but I love how you're telling this. I'm falling into it, even though some of this I already know.
Right.
It's like rediscovering it.
Well, it was interesting because
so
I got a lot of really straight stuff.
Yeah.
And then as I started digging deeper, there were some writers who were just really found these interesting little details, and I just love. You'll see them all in our sources and credits. By the way, so many amazing writers who helped me put this piece together. Thank you, and certainly to be acknowledged. So I'm glad that I stuck at it because I was maybe like 8 sources in. And I just kept digging because I thought I need more. I need some more. I need and started finding some more interesting, and almost like prose written about it, like a storytelling sort of, which I really appreciate. So this actually is from Everett John Daniels from the Times UK, and he describes one such encounter. The German soldier was propping up the bar, enjoying his beer. The Dutch girl, young and seductive, caught his eye. Maybe he turned on some charm. Possibly she laughed at his jokes. Would he like to go for a stroll in the woods? What red-blooded man away from home could resist the prospect of a tryst? He grabbed his coat, and the pair set off along the dark, overgrown path in the woods nearby. Along the way they ran into someone. which was made to seem a coincidence. But he was actually part of the resistance. And this man said to Truus, "Girl, you know you're not supposed to be out here." They apologized, turned around, and walked the other way. And then the shots were fired from a hiding resistance member, so that man never knew it hit him.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Like, what a story.
I know. What?
Yeah.
Nerves of steel.
So that mission was a success, but there was no time to celebrate as the sound of German trucks and barking dogs in the distance warned them to get out before that after party could ever start. And in this particular instance, in the chaos of that escape, Freddie was accidentally left behind at her lookout post.
Oh, no.
So when Truus realized what had happened, she ran back to find poor Freddie, very shaken and having wet herself from fear.
Oh.
But luckily, they both made it out safely.
Oh, my gosh. Thank goodness.
Can you imagine?
No.
And she was frozen, she couldn't even move.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as Franz van der Wiel, who recruited them, had said, Freddie and Truus's confidence began to grow, and the sisters began to go on assassination missions by themselves.
Oh, my goodness.
So it started out where somebody from the resistance would be in the woods, and they, one of them would lure.
Yeah.
But after a while, they were kind of like, their confidence grew, and they were like, hey, we can do this. One can lure them, the other one can shoot. We're good.
Wow.
Yeah. So the sisters' method evolved to just approaching their targets, again, in taverns and bars, where they would continue to ask. Their big thing was, would you like to go for a stroll? They would act drunk. And after reaching deep into the forest, the other sister would shoot from a distance. And they referred to this as liquidating.
Liquidating, okay.
They weren't killing or murdering. They were liquidating.
Okay.
Freddie recounted one such mission. We had to go to a meeting place, and we had to dance with those men. But we could not show any emotions because those men were our enemies. I was 16 when I did this. One time I met a man who wanted to go for a walk in the woods, so we did, and when we were deep enough into the woods, he asked me if I would go with him. That was when I had to lure him to the spot where he was shot, and I had to see him die.
Aww.
These missions required them to walk this really fine line between, feigned interest and that constant risk of being discovered. So some targets were Dutch collaborators who gave the Nazi details of Jewish and dissident families. Others, of course, were those high-ranking Nazi officers, SS soldiers. The sisters regarded the killings as a grim necessity that was secondary to their most important work, which was rescuing children.
Wow.
So while they were doing these assassinations, they were also rescuing children. They would help smuggle Jewish children through the Netherlands, and sometimes even as bombs fell from the Allied aircrafts overhead.
Wow.
These were teenagers.
I know, it's so hard to fathom. It's so hard to fathom the whole thing. Yeah.
It's just shocking.
Just amazing.
I just think about, like we were talking about earlier, like the bullshit, we were talking about girls and the drama and the bullshit they go through as teenagers. And these girls didn't have time for bullshit or drama. Oh, no.
No.
Oh, no. This was like the real deal. This was unbelievable. So I am going to give you a little trigger warning here because this next little segment involves violence and death toward children, which is horrifying. So, again, Truus and Freddie's hatred just continued to grow in them, just to fester and grow, because they would continue to have to witness horrifying things that people were doing to the Jews, to the dissidents, to gay people, to, anybody who basically didn't follow the Nazi regime. So there was a book written by Sophie Polderman. It's called Seducing and Killing Nazis, Hannie, Truus, and Freddie, Dutch Resistance Heroines of World War II. And in this book, Truus describes a terrible scene. To quote her, she says, "While I was biking, I saw Germans pick up innocent people from the streets, putting them against a wall and shooting them. I was forced to watch, which aroused such an enormous anger and hatred in me, such a disgust. A feeling of dirty bastards. You can have any political conviction or be totally against war, but at the moment you are just a human being confronted with something very cruel." Shooting innocent people is murder. If you experience something like this, you'll find it justified to act against it. It was a necessary evil, killing those who betrayed the good people. Truus goes on to tell, once I was confronted with an SS soldier, a Dutch SS soldier even, who was killing a small baby by hitting it against a wall in front of its father and sibling. He grabbed that baby and he hit it against the wall repeatedly while that father and sister had to watch. They were obviously hysterical and the child was bleeding and dead. I shot the guy right then and there. That wasn't an assignment, but I don't regret it at all.
Oh, gosh.
Can you fucking imagine? Can you even imagine having to witness something like that?
Well, that's why, we say, we can't imagine sending our children out there. We can't imagine this. We can't imagine. We cannot, we don't.
The horrors of Hitlerism in World War II. We cannot imagine those horrors.
Right.
And so horrifying that people had to endure that. And in so many ways. So many ways. So, according to Bas van Bende-Beckman, a former researcher at the Netherlands Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies, these were very unusual girls. There were a lot of women involved in the resistance in the Netherlands, but not so much in the way that these girls were. There are not that many examples of women who actually shot collaborators themselves the way they did.
And the whole thing about luring them into these woods, I always wonder what if these men just pounced on them before they had a chance to shoot them, and the dangers that they undertook. It's just mind-boggling.
And you think about, if this was their tactic, over time, I'm sure it was talked about.
Yeah.
I'm sure, watch out for those girls.
Right.
Which we get to a little bit. But these kills soon just took a toll on them. Can you imagine?
How could it not?
How could it not? Yeah, and Truus said in an interview with Alice Jonker for the 2014 book Under Fire, Women in World War II, it was tragic and very difficult, and we would cry about it afterwards. We did not feel it suited us. It never suits anybody unless they are real criminals. One loses everything. It poisons the beautiful things in life. It's just, God, heart-wrenching. And over time, things were getting too intense. Like I just talked about, it was starting to be talked about.
Right.
It was starting to be shared that these scenarios were happening, these attractive girls. And it just became a little bit too well known for comfort, and they decided it was time to leave and move on. So at this time, they packed their bags and they made their way to Enschede, which is in the eastern part of the Netherlands, close to the German border, where they joined their Aunt Griet, and they started volunteering as nurses at an evacuation hospital. Meanwhile, Frans van der Wiel was coming up with an idea. He had been working, of course, with Truus and Freddie for a long time, and he certainly knew their value. He knew how damn good they were at what they did. And he didn't want to lose them. But he also knew that they could be more effective, perhaps, if they had the right partner. So that's when he decided that he had the right person in mind. And her name was Hannie Schaft. And she was also trained by Frans. She's a little bit older than them. Hannie was born on September 16th, 1920, and she grew up in Haarlem as well. But she had a very, very different upbringing than the Oversteegens. Her family was more affluent and conservative, and she was actually studying human rights law at the University of Amsterdam when the war interrupted her education. And basically she dropped out because she refused to sign a pledge of loyalty to Germany.
Oh, wow.
At that time. She was like, fuck this. No, thank you. Basically, Frans decided, okay, you need to go in to this hospital and meet these girls. The three of you need to meet and talk. So she disguised herself as a student nurse, and she arrived at the hospital looking for the sisters. I guess Aunt Griet was in on this. She kind of served as that matchmaker, and she set up a meeting between the three women. As Freddie would later recount, the three of them just sat there in silence, kind of staring at each other for what felt like an eternity. You know, they all had their hands on their hidden weapons, and they were sizing each other up, waiting for someone to make the first move or say the first thing. And, you know, minutes went by that just felt like hours, and nobody blinked. I can't imagine what that meeting would have been like, right?
Gosh. Yeah. How do you learn to trust anybody after that life experience?
And then suddenly the mood changed, and the three of them just burst out laughing.
Probably relief from all the tension.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine? Yeah. They just kind of burst out laughing, and that ice was finally broken, and they put their guns on the table and decided to get down to business. I would have loved to bet a fly on the wall, you know? And Freddie later confessed that she felt a little bit jealous, a little bit intimidated toward Hannie, because, you know, she and Truus had been the only girls in the RVV.
Yeah.
And she was concerned, you know. She thought,
who's this competition?
Yeah, this girl better prove herself.
Yeah.
But I guess any doubts quickly vanished as she really showed herself as very brave and passionate. And as Freddie put it, at first sight, Hannie was really sweet. She was a sweetheart, and she was very gentle. She had this commanding presence with this level gaze and kind of this throaty laugh. So she seemed kind of soft, Freddie said at first. And you would think to yourself, like, how is it possible that this person could be part of the resistance? And Truus and Freddie really had it in their mind that they were a lot tougher than she was. So they were a little bit concerned. But apparently they assumed wrong. Because it quickly turned out that Hannie was a real resistance woman. She was very courageous. She was fiercely anti-fascist. And when she did her thing seamlessly, they just thought, yes. And the three developed this iron bond. So thus Freddie, Truus, and Hannie now continued to build a reputation around the sisters' bold tactic and continued tactic of seducing German soldiers and leading them into the woods and taking them out once they were there. You think about this, they're in a different part of the Netherlands at this point. Because I think, well, why didn't people know? But they didn't have the internet. They didn't have...
Oh, that's true.
Word didn't spread in the same way. Although I'm sure there was still a concern, and I'm sure word did spread to a certain extent. But they had kind of moved into a different area, sticking to their tactic.
Got it.
And in addition to their liquidations, they helped transport Jews to hiding spots. They continued to blow up railways, and they planted a communist flag at the headquarters of the National Socialist Movement, just to name a few things.
Oh, wow.
That had to be pretty intense.
Bold. Yeah.
Very bold. Very bold. Of course, had they been caught by the Nazis, by the Dutch police, they would have been killed.
Right.
But the fact that they were these young, attractive, innocent girls, they were flying under the radar.
They were able to do this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Freddie continued to look, she was the youngest, but she always looked young. So she kind of became in charge of following the targets because she just always appeared so unsuspecting.
Yeah.
As the girls started working together, they realized that they really complemented each other perfectly. Hannie, of course, was the intellectual. She was sharp and she was nerdy. And she ended up teaching both German and English to Truus and Freddie.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty invaluable.
Yeah.
Truus was their decisive, down-to-earth leader and the feminine and fierce. Freddie was the detail-oriented one. She meticulously planned and mapped out every part of their mission. So before long, they became inseparable, ready to take on whatever came their way. And by 1943, Hannie was just part of the group like she had always been there.
Yeah.
They kind of couldn't even remember a time when Hannie wasn't part of it. Luring those Nazi soldiers to their deaths became their mission and stock in trade. And in one notable operation, Truus and Hannie were tasked with eliminating a high-ranking Gestapo officer. As Truus later described, Hannie and I had to wait in the woods. But when the car approached, it was clear that there were more soldiers than we had expected.
Oh, wow.
We had to adjust our plan quickly, and in the end, we managed to carry out the attack on more than one soldier, but it was a very close call.
Oh, my goodness.
They were outnumbered.
Wow.
Yeah. So Hannie had this striking red hair, and it had always made her stand out. And even back
Which isn't a good thing when you're trying to be conspicuous.
This is the thing. Like they talk about this, and all I can think is, the first thing I think I would have fucking done is dye my hair.
Dye your hair, right?
I would have dyed my hair. Just me. Again, we don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Was it hard to get hair dye then?
I don't know. Well, it was the war.
Who knows? Yeah, exactly. She had been teased about it kind of her whole life because she had just this bright red hair, apparently. And she was bullied when she was younger, but then as she became older, she kind of became proud of her red hair and kind of became like her signature. I don't know, maybe that's why she didn't want to dye. But again, doing her work, I don't know if I would have kept my red hair. Yeah, because the last thing you'd really want to do, doing missions like this, would be to stick out.
Right.
It started to catch the enemy's eye.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So every time the SS soldiers were lucky enough to kind of get a glimpse of her, she fled the scene of her latest attack. And they had a nickname for her, which was the girl with the red hair. And she was eventually placed on the Nazis' most wanted list because of it.
Wow.
Yeah. Dye your hair, Hannie.
Right?
Dye your freaking hair. Oh, my God. On June 21st, 1944, Hannie and her resistance comrade Jan Boonkamp went after William Ragout, a Dutch police officer and Nazi collaborator. They cornered Ragout on the streets of Zaandam in North Holland, and Schaft acted swiftly, firing a shot into his back. But Ragout managed to retaliate, injuring Boonkamp.
Oh, wow.
And he was badly wounded. So although they completed their mission and killed Ragout, Boonkamp was caught by the Nazis as he tried to flee the scene, and he was taken to the hospital. So they're not sure exactly what happened, but he was put on a lot of morphine. So perhaps in a morphine-induced state, he revealed information about Hannie to the nurses.
Oh, wow.
Who, unfortunately, were Nazi sympathizers.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
So the Nazis jumped on the information, and although they couldn't find Hannie, they were able to find her parents, and they immediately deported them to a concentration camp. And they figured this would be their bargaining chip. You know, if they sent them to a concentration camp, that Hannie would come forward, but she was too smart for that. And she knew that turning herself in wouldn't do any good because the Nazis would just kill her and probably her parents too.
Right.
So she waited it out. And 9 months later, her parents were released, which I don't know why.
Wow.
Again, this is something I found, but I don't know why. Thankfully.
Yeah.
Thankfully they were.
Yeah.
But I
maybe because they weren't Jewish or any of the other, they didn't have the profile of anybody else they were exterminating. I don't know.
Maybe they had a conscience. Doubt it.
I don't know about that.
I don't think so. Okay. So June 6, 1944 opened up a new battleground in Western Europe, and the Soviet Red Army was pushing back in the east, and the Nazis were being squeezed from both sides, of course, and they knew that the end of the war was coming fast. So despite this, Hannie knew she couldn't let her guard down, particularly after what happened to her parents. So in an attempt to create a new layer of protection, she decided to dye her hair.
Oh, well, thank you, Hannie.
Why did she wait until then?
I don't know.
Oh my God. I don't know why. I don't know. Okay. Wow, you think so?
Well, you know, I guess when you're tough and you have to just have that mindset, maybe you're just like, I will not give in.
Again, no judgment, but I can't help but to think it's about damn time.
Dye your freaking hair.
Yeah. On March 21st, 1945, Hannie failed to return from an assignment. Truus and Freddie were extremely worried, and they found out that she had been detained at a police checkpoint in Harlem. And though her hair was dyed black, the red color of her roots revealed her identity.
Oh, no.
This is why it's a good reason to keep those roots in check.
Right. Always dye your roots.
I don't abide by that, but I'm not an assassin with bright red hair, so
that is a difference.
Yeah. The search of her bag turned up copies of an underground communist paper, also a pistol, serving as incriminating evidence for her arrest. So once Schaft was in custody, the Nazis immediately attempted to break her. They placed her in solitary confinement. They subjected her to relentless torture. But nonetheless, she maintained her composure and she refused to give them anything.
Wow.
So by this point, she was transferred to Amsterdam, where she came face to face with Emil Roel, a notorious Nazi interrogator. And Roel gave her an ultimatum: confess everything or 5 innocent Dutch girls would be executed.
Oh my gosh.
And she was interrogated and, of course, tortured some more. And it was just too much for her to bear, of course. So exhausted, she finally broke down. So she languished in her prison cell, and her resistant allies were desperately trying to find a way, of course, to get her out. They were pulling every string they could, tried to call in favors and making deals to secure her release. But, you know, the Nazis knew they were going down at this point. And they were just very, you know, thirsty for blood and revenge. They knew there was no way out. So what did they do? April 17th, 1945, Hannie Schaft was led to the dunes of Overveen by 2 Dutch Nazis, and without warning, one whipped out his pistol, aiming a shot at Annie's head. He missed.
Oh my gosh.
The bullet grazed her temple, and as blood trickled down her face, she uttered an almost surprised, "Oh!" Hannie's courage was evident even in her final moments as she faced her executioners and reportedly said, "I guess I shoot better than you." Go, Hannie!
Go, Hannie! Oh my gosh.
At that point, she was shot a second time, and this time fatally. She got the last word.
She got the last word.
Hannie Schaft, God bless her, man. She got the last word. That's so fucking rad. It's in that moment. Isn't that so rad?
That is great.
That she said that.
How do we know she said that?
To the grave.
Well,
You know, that's a good point. I don't know. At the time, she was there with SS soldiers. Who knows how many were there? Who knows how many were willingly part of what was going on?
Well, I tell you, I'm going to say it doesn't matter. It's a great way to think about her going down.
Oh, yeah.
So
took it to the grave.
That's great.
To the grave. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hannie was only 24 years old.
Oh, my God.
And what's really sad, it was just 18 days before the Netherlands would be liberated.
Of course.
Of course, yeah. So this legendary fighter, known as the girl with the red hair, became the icon of the female Dutch resistance.
Wow.
And again, Truus and Freddie were just devastated by the loss of what they considered to be their very best friend. And after the war, they did their best to move on. Truus is quoted as saying, "We never felt it suited us, being an assassin. It never suits anybody unless they are real criminals." Both sisters were responsible for shootings, but neither one of them ever revealed how many Nazis and Dutch collaborators they assassinated. And when asked, Freddie would always tell people that she and her sister were soldiers, and soldiers don't say.
Wow.
It's true. They both suffered from, of course, what nowadays would be called post-traumatic stress disorder.
I would think so.
Yeah. They both endured nightmares, screaming, fighting in their sleep. And Hannie Schaft's letters, as well as testimony from her friends and fellow resistors, suggest that she also suffered from depression and PTSD during the war prior to her arrest and execution. How could you not?
How could you not?
How could you not?
Absolutely.
So after the war, the sisters continued to deal with the trauma of killing people, of losing their best friend. Truus, though, went on to become an artist. She created sculptures, and she remained very open and talkative about her experiences. Later speaking and writing about their time in the resistance, in 1982, she wrote a wartime memoir called Not Then, Not Now, Never. But after the war in 1945, she married fellow resistance member Piet Menger, and the couple had 4 children together, the oldest of whom she named Hannie in remembrance of Schaft. Now, Freddie, on the other hand, she suffered greatly. I mean, they both suffered greatly. Whereas Truus, though, talked about it very openly, Freddie did not. Tried to really just hide and not involve herself or speak about it. She married Jan Decker, who was an engineer at a local steel factory. She threw herself into her domestic life. She had 3 children. She just decided that was going to be
her thing.
Yep. And she struggled to speak about the war, and despite trying to bury it, she realized that, she and her sister were really overlooked, and their efforts were really overlooked, and that was really painful for her too.
Yeah.
But, her family, her husband, her children, they were always trying to protect her. She was very sensitive. They were trying to protect her from troubling memories of the war, and it just caused her a lot of trauma throughout her life. Hannie was Freddie's soulmate, said Manon Hornstra, a filmmaker to whom Freddie confided many of her war memories. Freddie could never understand why the Nazis killed Hannie just before the end of the war. She always took red roses to her grave. The peace was never easy for Freddie. Her son is quoted as saying she shot a few people, and these were really, really bad guys, but she hated it, and she hated herself for doing it. She never forgave herself, it seems. So as the Cold War began and McCarthyism took hold in the United States, communist resistant fighters became so out of favor that in 1951 the Dutch government forcibly tried to prevent the commemoration of Hannie Schaft's death.
Oh.
So freaking sad. So Truus and Freddie felt completely alienated from, their country that they had worked so hard to protect. And they were embittered. They felt really embittered to see former Nazi sympathizers not held to account. Their work and other resistance members, bravery and selflessness and work not acknowledged. And throughout much of their lives, the Netherlands failed to properly recognize the women's achievements and sidelined them just as communists. But eventually the release of a film about Hannie Schaft in 1981 made her famous, made her much more of a name, and helped rehabilitate both her and the sisters in national history. In the years that followed, Truus and Freddie committed themselves to preserving Hannah's legacy and ensuring that the world would never forget the contributors of the Dutch resistance. In 1996, Truus started the National Hannie Schaft Foundation to honor their fallen friend and to educate people about the sacrifices that resistance fighters had made. Freddie decided at that point to work tirelessly alongside her.
I'm so glad.
I know.
I'm glad
it was important.
Yeah.
It was important.
It really says something about the importance of speaking and talking and acknowledging as opposed to repressing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, it does speak to that, totally. But however, during the last years of their lives, the sisters were still yearning for more acknowledgement of their roles. In 2014, though, they finally received the Dutch Mobilization War Cross, receiving national recognition for their service to their country in what the Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, called an act of historical justice. Beautiful. Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. So toward the end of her life, Freddie, too, began to speak again about those war experiences, opening up to the documentary makers, Hornstra, who we mentioned earlier, and a woman named Tej Zeeman for their 2016 film Two Sisters in the Resistance. And after much persuading, Freddie returned to the woods where Truus had first led an SS officer to his death and where Freddie believed he is still buried.
Wow.
They said that on the way there in the car, we could see that she was very vulnerable, visibly shaken, and she began singing. Hornstra recalled it was a song that the members of the resistance group always sang when they were afraid.
Aww.
So many years after doing their work in the shadows, Freddie and Truus were glad for that public recognition, and they wanted their stories to be known so they could teach people, as Truus put it, that even when the work is hard, you must always remain human. Going back, of course, to what their mother had said to them. And it was, Freddie said, both a source of tremendous pride and tremendous pain. A 5-year experience that she never regretted, but that came to haunt her in peacetime for the rest of her life.
Wow.
What a freaking story.
That is really a tremendous story, and I really have to commend you on doing such a great job with that deep dive into it.
Thank you. You know me, I can't stop the deep dive, but these girls, not even women, these girls who became women during those 5 years.
Yep.
I mean, they became women way sooner than they should have.
Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't have a carefree life. They didn't have...
No, and they paid the price.
An adolescence,
the sisters really paid their price for the rest of their lives.
They did.
Yeah.
They did, especially poor Freddie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm glad, like you said, that she was able to talk about it in the latter years.
Yeah.
You know, I think it was very important
And that they were acknowledged.
Yeah, oh God, that they were acknowledged.
Yeah.
You know, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast.
Yes.
Acknowledge these great, amazing women that maybe you've heard of. Maybe, like April had heard of these.
Well, I only heard of them because of our podcast.
Yeah.
I was researching.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and getting up the nerve to cover their story.
Yeah, so important. So important. So thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yes, and thank you, Missy, for this deep dive and
you,
wonderful, amazing Sheelas.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. And if you have some Sheelas you want to share with us, we would love to know. Yep. And we really appreciate you listening. We welcome your comments, call to action. Comments, questions, we would love that.
And ideas, your Sheelas.
Ideas, your Sheelas, please. We want this to be interactive as much as possible. So I know we're kind of new on the scene, but we really are looking for some interaction. So thanks again for listening.
Thank you. Peace out.
Peace out.